Cloud9 have subbed out Jensen, Sneaky, and Smoothie for Golden Glue, Keith, and Zazel. Now, I recommend you all to watch the Cloud9 videos if you haven't, talking about the roster changes, and also the interview with Travis with Jack. But, and essentially in that interview, he said that they weren't hungry to learn and the academy team was doing really well, so they decided to sub out their main roster for their academy roster. And Reaper had talked to Jack and said that basically they wouldn't make worlds with their current iteration of players in the player atmosphere. So basically, this says the team is just undermotivated, right? Now, looking at the roster, you can obviously tell that there's huge skill discrepancies between these players. I mean, we all know that Golden Glue is nowhere near the level of Jensen, as Golden Glue has had multiple opportunities to start on various rosters, but he's fallen short, right? So it's, even if they made a PR statement within all these videos and these interviews to say that it's a motivational issue rather than a performance issue, just looking at the nameplates, you can tell that it's probably not a skill issue, even if they are giving these PR statements. And when you look at Golden Glue, this player, he's in this strange elo limbo to where he's not good enough to be an LCS mid laner, but he's not bad enough to be in the Academy League because he'll just shit on all the other mid laners there. So it kind of makes you wonder what's going on with Golden Glue. And what I've always believed is that it's been like this mental block on stage versus his reported Scrim God status, to where there isn't that pressure on your shoulders to carry as a mid laner or to rotate as a mid laner and to help out the rest of your team, because I mean, let's face it, mid lane is one of the most important roles within entire League of Legends, and it always has been. Now with Sneaky and Smoothie, it's arguably they're the third best bot lane within NA, and Keith has been the epitome of inconsistency, while starkly Sneaky has been considered the most consistent ADC out of the entire North American scene. And well, I mean, maybe we should call them marksmen now, given that they're fucking bruisers and mages playing bot lane. But besides the point, Sneaky is the king of consistency, so it seems strange that he would be replaced by Keith for a performance issue, right? So then we can assume also too that their words weren't just PR and that maybe it is, motivation instead. And then you have Zazel, and while he looked much improved last split, I was extremely disappointed with him while playing with Deathly in United. He would often just not know basic things such as lane trade patterns and basic map rotations. So I think it's an incredible downgrade from Smoothie, who understands all that shit. And maybe the substitution then is because, well, you might as well sub them out as a duo. It's probably best, and bring them both on as a duo so that they're in a more comfortable environment. They've already played with this other ADC or this other support, so they don't have to change their play style to accommodate the other person. And if you listen to the Cloud9 Eyes on Keith video, Reaper says that Jensen and Sneaky will be benched, with Zazel being the sixth man. Now, I don't know if this is, a nuance for, not being proficient at the English language, but it sounds as if he was hesitant to say that, Smoothie would ride the bench for the same problems that Jensen and Sneaky have. So this just ties into the whole reasoning that Smoothie is benched because kind of the sins of Sneaky, which sucks, but, you go down with your teammates. Now, this is the perfect time to reward the Academy team also, because it's the beginning of the season, there's far less pressure, and I mean, let's face it, inevitably when the main roster gets back into, the lineup, then these guys, they're they already know how to deal with pressure, right? So even if this sub lineup comes in and does bad, they can bring it back together to get back into playoffs. So it's more pressure on the main roster and less pressure on the sub roster. So they can have an easier time developing as they're on the LCS stage in the beginning of the season. So it makes sense just in that regard. Now, all of this sounds like a behavioral issue to me and a motivational issue as well too. And you have to think solo queue is very important within this meta because you have to practice these picks which are very unconventional, which probably aren't within your champion pool. You know, like say Yasuo for instance for ADC, you probably have to practice that because you don't play a lot of Yasuo within the bot lane unless you're trolling in past seasons, right? You have to know his trade patterns. You have to know how to use his win wall against an ADC. You have to know how to dash through minions and then Q harass and then pull back and have your support coordinate with that as well too. So it's a lot of nuances with just the basic champion kits and basic champion matchups, which you have to learn. So as an ADC or as a mid laner or as a support, you have to know all of these nuances. And solo queue is one of the best environments to actually learn a champion's kit just in itself. And if you have the viewpoint that solo queue isn't effective and it's not great, and if that bleeds into what we are within now, this current meta, it's probably going to hinder your growth. So maybe that's where all of this stems from, all of this benching stems from, is that, you know, a practice or a lack of practice on these meta picks is really hindering the Cloud9 main roster. Now, this roster change is entirely possible only because of franchising. And I say this because within relegations, you probably wouldn't sub in fucking Keith for Sneaky, or you definitely wouldn't sub in Golden Glue for Jensen. I just don't see that happening in a world with relegations where essentially every match matters and you can't afford to lose. Now Jack and Reaper can kind of gamble on this and say, well, if we fail and we don't make playoffs, we're going to be around next year. So we're going to learn from that mistake and we can still press on. And if these guys aren't motivated in order to get back to the main roster, well, fuck it. We'll just get other people, right? We can afford to tank a season because this is a franchise model. We're allowed to do these risks. That's one of the purposes for franchises, is that you aren't tied to these players. You aren't held hostage by Jensen or Sneaky to you know, refuse to go into this meta because they know that they have the star power and you have no one else to replace them, or else you'll possibly get relegated, right? That's no longer a risk anymore. So now I want to show the difference between the SKT subbing, because I know a lot of people will make that comparison of Faker, Bang, and Wolf being benched. I think it's an entirely different situation, as SKT is just basically in fucking shambles and they aren't performing to a high degree, versus Jensen, Sneaky, and Smoothie. They are performing to a pretty high degree, but it's mostly due to motivation, right? It's mostly due to not learning this meta and not learning the new picks or the new champions. And then there's also a difference of Reckless being benched today in Fnatic, since, of course, Young Buck had said just straight out that this was for strategical reasons. Now, you can call that a possible lie, but if you look at their draft against H2K with Bwipo and Soaz, Fnatic was able to ban out top laners and threaten the flex pick of Aurelia bot. But then they ran Ryze bottom at the very last second of Champ Select, switching it over to Bwipo, making sure that the enemy couldn't counterpick them, right? Because at the very end, 20 seconds, you can last switch. And so that makes it to where that they essentially can't be counterpicked. And it's a very genius strategy, honestly. So props to Fnatic for actually thinking of that and then switching their summoner spells and such. So brilliant from them, but completely different from Cloud9's situation. Because it was entirely strategic on their end, versus Cloud9. It seems very motivational. So I think it's it's a very positive thing that Cloud9 is willing to do this, because they're willing to show that they can put their foot down and that they won't be controlled by players. They won't be controlled by even star players. The second or first best mid laner within North America, they won't be controlled by him. They won't be controlled by this consistent ADC player. So it's a good motion for Cloud9 to do, and I think it's healthy for a organization to be able to do this. And I just want to say big ups to Cloud9. I think it's a smart move.